the weight of the walk, what your obstacles actually say about you. Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Renee. Now, I'm a social worker, and this podcast exists because I believe personal development is almost exactly like social work with a different name. And most personal development spaces are missing the lens that actually makes it land. Today, we're going to talk about something that gets said a lot and understood very little: success and what it's actually made of. There's a quote I keep coming back to. It's from Booker T. Washington. And if you don't know his story, you're going to know it better by the end of this episode. He said, success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in their life as by the obstacles which they have overcome while trying to succeed. That quote sounds like a poster. It sounds like something you'd see on the wall of a guidance counselor's office. But when you know who said it, and what he was standing in when he said it, it becomes something completely different. It becomes a document of survival, of will, of a kind of success that most of us will never be asked to demonstrate. Now let's start there. Booker T. Washington was born in 1856 on a plantation in Virginia into slavery. He was listed on his owner's property inventory at age 5, right alongside the cattle and the furniture, valued at $400. That was his beginning. Not a name, not a birth date anyone recorded, not a father who claimed him, just a number in a ledger. His first memory of education was standing outside a schoolhouse, looking through the window at children his age, sitting at desks, holding books. He couldn't go in. He wasn't even allowed to go in, but he stood there and watched anyway. When emancipation came in 1865, he was 9 years old, free, but free into a world that had nothing ready for him. His family moved to West Virginia, and by the time he was old enough to went to school, he was already in the salt mine at 4 in the morning to help feed the family. So he'd work his shift and then go to class, because that was the only way to do both. At 16, he heard about a school called Hampton Institute, nearly 500 miles away. He had almost no money. He walked most of it, and when he arrived, he was filthy and broke, and the school wasn't sure what to do with him. So they gave him a test, not a written test. They handed him a broom and told him to clean a room. He swept it 3 times. He dusted every corner, and he made it immaculate. He got in. By 1881, 25 years old, Booker T. Washington was named the first leader of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, a school he didn't just run. A school that, in the early days, didn't have buildings, so he and the students built them with their hands from scratch. By the time he died in 1915, Tuskegee had over 100 buildings, 1,500 students, and 200 faculty members. He was also, in 1901, the first African American ever invited to dine at the White House. A man who was literally inventoried as property at age 5, dining with the President of the United States at 45. That is the man who wrote the quote we started with. That's not a motivational poster. That's a man who earned the right to define success differently. Now, here's what I want to do with that story, because I think we can let it land in a way that's more than just, wow, what a remarkable man. When I look at Booker T. Washington through the lens what I bring to my work, a lens that's always asking about power, about systems, about what a person is carrying and where it came from, I don't just see a success story. I see something more specific. I see a person who was never, not once, allowed to define the starting condition of his life, and who decided anyway, and to define what he did with them. That is different from the usual obstacles and opportunities story we get in personal development spaces, because that framing, honestly, can be a bit dangerous. It can slide into telling people that the system is fine, that the deck wasn't stacked, and that all you needed was the right mindset. And for a lot of people, that's not the whole truth. But here's what I take from Washington that I think holds, even with that critique. He didn't wait for the conditions to be fair before he started moving. He didn't wait to be valued before he acted like he had value. He didn't wait for the door to open before he learned everything he could about how doors work. And here's the social work piece of this, the one I think matters most for the people listening to this right now. We spend a lot of time measuring ourselves against a rival, against the destination, against who got the job and who has the house, who built the business, and the culture around us, especially on social media, is absolutely set up to keep us measuring that way, because comparison to a destination makes you feel behind, and feeling behind keeps you consuming. Washington's quote flips the whole frame. He's saying, I know what I came from, and the distance I've covered, that is the success, not where I ended up, the distance I crossed. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying struggle is glamorous. I'm not romanticizing hard. I've sat across from enough people who were handed hard to know that this is not a gift, it's a weight. But what Washington is naming is something that I've seen again and again in the work and in my own life. The people who have moved through real obstacle, real structural, grinding obstacle often carry a kind of knowing that people who haven't can't replicate. They know what they're made of, not because someone told them, because they tested it. And there is something about that knowing that doesn't go away, even when everything else is uncertain. The question Washington is quietly asking, the one that I ask you today, is this. Are you measuring yourself by where you've gotten, or are you giving yourself any credit at all for what you've had to walk through to get here? Because most of us, we're doing the first one and it's costing us something real. Okay, so here's where I'm going to push a little, because I think there's an uncomfortable layer underneath this conversation that most people, most personal development content skips over entirely. We love the story of the person who overcame. We celebrate them. We put them on stages and in podcasts and on Instagram, and we say, look what's possible. Look what one person did. And then we quietly, sometimes not even consciously, use that story to place responsibility entirely on the individual. We tell people, look at what Booker T. Washington overcame. So what's your excuse? I want to name that. That is a misleading and harmful one, because Washington didn't succeed in spite of a system that worked against him. He succeeded by an almost incomprehensible act of individual will in a system that was actively designed to prevent exactly what he did. And when we use his story as a cudgel to tell people, just work harder, we're doing something I think that he would have found insulting. We're erasing the system. We're making it invisible, and we're putting all of that weight back on the person who is already carrying the most. So here is the deeper layer, the one that I want you to sit with. Your obstacles matter. They are real. And at the same time, you are not absolved from the work of moving through them. Both things are true. What I see in my work and what I've learned, honestly, from living in some of my own versions of hard, is that the most painful place to get stuck is the one where we've decided that because the obstacles are real, the movement is impossible. It's not. But here's what I also know. If you have never been given the language to name what's in your way, if no one has ever acknowledged that the starting conditions were not neutral, that the playing field has never actually been level, then you're not just carrying this obstacle. You're carrying the obstacle and the shame of not having overcome it yet. And shame does not move people forward. It freezes them. So the deeper layer in this conversation is about giving yourself, and I mean really giving yourself, honest credit for the distance you've already covered, not the distance you think you were supposed to cover by now, not the distance someone else covered, the distance that was yours, the specific textured, real distance of your life that starts with actually knowing what you came from. A lot of us don't, not really. We know pieces of it, we felt it, but we haven't named it. We haven't mapped it. We haven't looked at it clearly enough to say, this is where I started and this is how far I've walked. Until you do that, you can't actually measure your success. You're just measuring your arrival, and arrival is only part of the story. All right, here's what I want you to do. And I mean right after this episode ends. Not someday, not when you have a journal and a perfect Saturday morning. After this, grab a piece of paper or open your phone's note app. Draw a line across the middle of the page and label the left end where I started and label the right end where I am now. On the left side, write down 3 things that were true at your starting point that were not in your control, not your attitude, not your choices, your conditions, your family's financial reality, a diagnosis, a loss, a system that failed you, a community that didn't have resources. 3 things you were handed that made the road harder. Then in the middle of that line, mark at least 3 points that represent something you crossed, a moment where you could have stopped and didn't, a decision you made that took something from you and you made it anyway, a door you had to push harder to get through than it looked like from the outside. Then on the right side, right where you are now, just factually. Not where I should be, where you actually are. Now look at that full line. That is your success, not the right end of it, the whole line. Washington swept that room 3 times because he understood something that most of us forgot. The quality of what you put into the crossing tells you something about who you are, not where you end up. You have crossed things. I want you to see them. That's what I've got for you today. If this landed for you, share it with someone who needs to see their own line a little more clearly. That's how this work spreads. I'll be back in the next episode. Take care of yourself. And in the meantime, and I actually mean take care of yourself, not in a performative way. Just do one real thing today that reminds you that you matter too. See you then.